What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another Sunday Scan. I hope that everyone had a great week and weekend. We have a lot to cover. Was joking around with Stan, who's going to join us later on, that this has felt like such a long week, and there's just been so many events with the Fed meeting, with earnings, with tariff news, with the DeepSeek stuff. It's just been like it's felt like a month or something. So it's been a very action-packed week, and we have a lot to cover. Stan and I are going to chat about some market thoughts, what to pay attention to, what are some things to think about on the macro side, and then how to like zoom that in and like drill it down into actionable trades, or at least things to watch for the week that you can then plug into your own setups and everything. So we have a lot of good content that we're going to discuss on this week's scan, and then also Sam and Lance sat down for a Trading Takes episode, which was fantastic. Sam went to Miami for that, and they recorded an hour-long episode that everyone should definitely check out. It's posted to the Investors Underground page right now, but just a lot of good, heuristics and like topics and good practices and habits for traders who are looking, basically to develop in any stage of their career, from, newly starting to people who are more intermediate or people who are quite advanced looking to scale up and do things on a sustainable basis. So definitely a lot of good topics to check out there. And then, the only thing that I want to bring up before we bring on Stan is, this has become a very headline and reaction based market, and that is a good environment for reactionary trades. And what those are is basically it's being familiar with a lot of the big themes, being familiar with what matters and what can move markets, and then waiting for those headlines and having go-tos. And so whether that's with like the DeepSeek news and like NVIDIA and like the top names there, or whether it's with like the Fed, talking about interest rates, or whether it's with Trump talking about tariffs and like what industries, what stocks can that affect? And then basically being familiar with those big themes, and then having those sectors on watch, and then having specific stocks on watch, and then drill it down into, okay, what setup does this fall into? Do I know how to trade that? Do I have a good risk to reward ratio? Is it a high probability trade? And just making sure that you're piecing all that together. But we have a lot of great topics that we're going to cover. So let's bring on Stan and we'll get right into it. All right, we have Stan back on Sunday Scan. Stan, welcome back to the show.
All right, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. And you and I were talking a little bit before we got going, and this last week has felt like a month. I mean, we've had so many different things with like the NVIDIA stuff, with the DeepSeek AI, headlines. We had tariff news. We had like all these different sector trades, all these like macro events happening. We had the FOMC. So it's just been like a really, really, hectic week. So I know that you have some great market thoughts and some observations about like the current market that we're in. So, what are you watching? What's on your radar?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I mean, like you said, this last week, it felt like time stood still for a second. I was getting ready for the Sunday video here and just reviewing some of my, trades and thought process. And then, every time like, oh, wait, that also happened last week. Oh, that also happened last week. So, I mean, we had the FOMC, right, on Wednesday, which provided for some volatility, but generally not much. Then we also had some of the, some of the bigger companies report earnings last week that, for me, I don't necessarily trade the earnings report like the day of. I mean, I might scalp something after hours here and there, but I'm more excited about the volatility that it brings in the days to follow, because during that volatility, it offers opportunities for various trading styles, right? Whether you're on the long side, short side, option side, if you're scalping, if you're looking for a bigger picture move on a higher time frame, something like that. So also NVIDIA, that was another ticker I think worthy of mentioning, because it had a pretty decent gap down on Monday, right, of last week on the DeepSeek news over the weekend, and then on Friday as well, it put a pretty nasty red bar there going into the close. So it will remain on watch for me for next week as well. And then I believe they report earnings towards the end of the month, 25th or 26th. I'll double check exactly which date. So it will remain on watch. But then, As far as the rest of the market, we also saw some good flow into small and mid caps. Small caps, we saw some great single day wonders like AMOD and KR. Also the quantum basket, RGTI, IonQ, QBTS, QUBT, etc. They attempted a reclaim and a push higher almost, it felt like, every day of last week, but each day got sold off. And then on Friday, it was really good strength there out of the gate. But then also it ended up selling off a little bit there towards the close. So a lot happened last week, and I think it should provide for some good opportunities in the week to follow.
Yeah, and I know that last week on Scan, I was asking in the comment section, what are some things that people would like to learn a little bit more about, or what would you like us to focus on? And someone had a good comment about, wanting to understand macro signals more, or like what are like the themes in the market? How do you kind of know like when sectors are rotating? And a couple of notes, like just like what Stan was just describing, you kind of look at what are the big things happening in the markets, and you kind of identify the 4 or 5 driving variables. So big tech earnings, that's a big one for markets. The FOMC can be a big one depending on what part of the cycle we're in. Something with like DeepSeek, which is moving the AI names, which have been the most in play names. So that's like a big signal. So you just kind of go through and you identify what are big things that are causing reactions. It has to be able to cause a reaction. If it's if they're talking about like, the Panama Canal stuff or whatever, but like no stocks are actually moving off of it, that's not like a driving, key theme in the market. But something like the tariff news, that can be. And we'll get into some names that might be, potentially affected by that later on. But it's just good to identify like what are like the impactful themes and have those on your radar. And so whether you write them down for the week, like what do you think are the driving variables of that week? And that could be tariffs, could be earnings, could be a couple of other things, but have those on your radar. And then when you see headlines related to those, you're looking for, which stocks is that impacting? And then if those stocks are falling into some kind of setup that you know how to trade, then you kind of just work from like a macro view and you just dial in until you have like, a key driving variable that's in place, a sector that's in play, a name that's in play, and then it falls into a setup that's in play. And, you kind of work your way down, and that helps to, cut down on the time it takes to react to some of these things. And something that Stan is really good at is reacting to, trades. And what does that really mean? Maybe I'll let Stan kind of take that over, but it's basically, as something happens, making quick decisions of if it falls into a setup or not. So Stan, how do you think about reactionary trades and why is it important in this market?
Yeah, that's a great way, a great segue there, Chris, because now I believe we're, really into that reactionary trade type of phase or opportunity, because as you explained, when you notice these bigger events on a higher time frame or bigger news that drive the market, so something like the DeepSeek news, or if something quantum related now. So given where we are in the move, if a PR comes regarding quantum or regarding DeepSeek or regarding NVDA, you now have these levels established where if they fail, it's going to be that much more aggressive, because we've been indecisive for X amount of sessions, and now that PR is the catalyst that it needs. So the only thing that matters is which trade are you taking and how quickly can you react to it, while keeping the higher time frames in mind. So something like NVIDIA, as we know, it's getting pretty dangerously close to those double digits, right? So if something else happens and comes out next week, then we could see an aggressive flush into the low 100s. And it's keeping that in mind and then being able to execute against it is where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you had some excellent trades on NVIDIA. So if you want, we can pull up your chart. And if you want to chat about that for a little bit, because I feel like it was a really good example of when something's in play, when it has a big range, preparing for it, using pre-market levels, waiting for some kind of a clear out to confirm, reject, and then scale in, scale out. And then I think also we'll get into the quantum names and everything soon thereafter too. And Google has earnings on, I believe, Tuesday sometime next week, and that's going to be a big driver. People are waiting for the quantum mention, so that could be a potential another pivot point. But before we get into all that, NVIDIA.
All right. So let me just zoom in a little bit. Well, so we have, this is essentially I think this is over the weekend. This is Friday, the 24th. And then this is the 27th on Monday. The gap down on the DeepSeek news over the weekend. So essentially, started in pre-market and just slowly was acquiring my position into and versus VWAP. But again, nothing that I really wanted to aggressively scale until some sort of a test happened into the 129s, 130s, essentially where this move started breaking down from. Because you see the break from 130 here, it broke down, and then it started congesting and channeling. So this congestion and channel here, for me, I need some sort of a confirmation before I can react to a size into a move. And once it opened, cleared out the pre-market highs, essentially, this congestion area here, not all the way to 130s, but it cleared out the congestion area, and then it failed to follow through. So it was able to scale in. And then the rest just essentially becomes cover along the way. And had some rescales around 2 p.m. and a little bit into the close, but nothing really of significance. The main move was essentially into the morning, and then the afternoon, it just slowly dripped away. So that was the NVIDIA trade on Monday. There was also another one, a reactive trade that we can quickly go over. I believe let me see if I can find the chart really quick. KRKR. And essentially the idea here is, reacting into some sort of a exhaustion move with the previous resistance. So KRKR, again, we had a nice move out of the gate, and it just held VWAP throughout the move. It exhausted into the 1112s, came back, held, and then once it cleared out again, started in. And here, the covers here are essentially recognizing that channel, right? Similar to how NVIDIA started channeling into that congestion move towards end of day. Recognizing the channel here is where I'd like to adjust the position until we have a clear break. So that was just an example of a reactionary trade into a previous resistance there.
Great. And then before we get into some of the more main watches for the upcoming week, I'll give the disclaimer that neither Stan nor I are financial advisors, and these are not buy or sell recommendations. All of this is for informational and educational purposes only. So, Stan, what do you have on watch for the upcoming week, and what really has your attention? What are those big themes that once they get down to a more specific level have your interest?
All right. Yeah. Let me pull up a chart again here. So I definitely we can go over the quantum basket in a few minutes. But we'll start with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is something that's on watch for me next week, mainly because of that pretty aggressive red bar that we had on Friday. We started off with a nice, right out of the gate, nice push into the 127s, and then once VWAP gave up, and it just sold all throughout the afternoon area there. So for me, what I'd like to see on Monday is some sort of a push, maybe 120s, 121, 122s, check in with this congestion area, and then fail to follow through. I think as far as a higher time frame chart, there's definitely some room towards low tens, at least low teens. That would be something that I would be looking for. Maybe, like I said, as it tries to find its bottom. I don't think it's going to be a straight shot down, but if it provides for a good risk exposure, some sort of a push, 120s, 122s, as we mentioned, into this congestion area, then I don't mind joining a fail to follow through. The next one that I have on watch is RGTI. RGTI has been a swing for me since last Friday, not this week, but the 24th. And throughout last week, I have been recycling some lots as respecting this 12 and 1250s support area. But for me, ideally, the goal for the swing is into the singles, and what I'm looking for is some sort of a fail to follow through on Monday morning. Ideally, shove into these 13.5, 13.60s. A slight gap would be ideal, but what I'd like to see is this 14s area remain heavy. And then once the 1150s, 12s area remains heavy as well, then I think we have a good shot towards singles. But that's just the higher time frame target for me. It's not necessarily these intraday moves there do not necessarily impact the thought process. The next couple that I have in watch are AMOD and also KRKR. And both of these are more so watching for a potential liquidity trap setup. We had a nice day here with the 126 million traded, and then it went to less than 2 million on the day. Similar with KRKR, we had a nice, whatever this was, 23 million, and then it couldn't even break 500,000. So there's a potential for a liquidity trap setup that will be watching for, and I know, Chris, you've done a fantastic video on that as well. So we can check that out. And then the last couple that I have in watch is OKLO. I like this setup because of the daily clear out there versus previous highs. So pretty much watching for this to stay heavy versus a key level. So any gap on Monday morning, 41, 42s that exhausts into this congestion area here, I don't mind participating in, as long as we see a fail to follow through momentum. And then you can also sprinkle risk across in this little basket with SMR and then NNE. Essentially, these three names is kind of what I'm watching, but OKLO is the focus because it just feels like a better setup to me. And the last one that I have in watch is CYCN. CYCN, just watching for continuation here, maybe exhaustion to this previous run. So not really participating into any move prior to that. More so want to see how we open, and if we speed up into this 5, 6s, etc., I will be interested in participating. And that's pretty much it for me, Chris. I don't know if you have some thoughts for us as well.
Yeah, no, those are great. And I think especially like relating to the quantum names, we talked a little bit about Google reporting. I believe it's on Tuesday. I don't want to, I'll verify that, but they report sometime early next week. And Google has been the driving force in the quantum sector. So we had, negative comments from NVIDIA CEO on quantum and a couple other things, but Google's been like the bright spot with their, quantum initiatives and everything. So I think that's kind of like the big pillar holding up the quantum sector. And so it's going to have to follow through. When Google reports earnings, they're going to have to, be hyping quantum up. They're going to have to be, pushing it, saying that they're leaning more into it. They could be looking for partnerships or to develop that sector. And that's really what the quantum names need in order to keep going. But I think if Google starts talking about, something else, if they start talking about more AI stuff, or if they start talking about tariffs or currency headway, other things that are not quantum focused, I think that the quantum sector could potentially just kind of fizzle off. And we see those sharp drops, those big rebounds in a lot of sectors, and I'll pull up a couple of names that I have on watch that kind of fit that. But so much of it depends on what are the driving variables of that sector, and then that can be a big determinant of whether or not that's just a big clear out on the daily chart, or is this like the start of the next leg higher. So a couple of names that I wanted to focus on for this upcoming week, like Stan mentioned, like OKLO, SMR, you had a lot of the power names, the AI power names get hit super hard. So you had this big gap down when the DeepSeek stuff came out. And what is the DeepSeek news? It's basically, China has historically waited for the US to come out with all these new technologies, and then China has just built applications to basically take advantage of those or to use them. With DeepSeek, China innovated and made their own model. At least that's what they claimed, and they claimed that they could do it for much cheaper. But really what they're finding out is it's most likely that they just kind of used other AI models to train their AI model, and is kind of a cheap workaround, but it's not super accurate or other things. So initially people didn't know, and that caused a huge sell-off. And then as the news kind of came out that, okay, it's not as straightforward as it seems. It's not like they're just able to build the same thing for 95% cheaper. Like there's workarounds. They're not including costs and everything else. So you had a big rebound in the AI sector, except for NVIDIA, which was interesting because I think you have part of the DeepSeek news and then also some of the tariff news on chips that's going to affect that. But all that to say is that the power names are still in play, and we'll see this week, I think, if this is the start of the next leg up, or if this is just like the quantum names where you had a big sell-off, a big rebound, and then it's exhausting out on the daily, and then it follows down. So VST has had more relative strength in the sector, and then CEG has been a little bit weaker. And just like Stan was saying, like OKLO, SMR, you can kind of identify which names are running the furthest, which ones are staying a little bit weaker, and then it just depends. Are you looking for a big like reversal trade, or are you looking for like the start of a new trend? And that's how you can kind of pick which names you focus on for that. Another name that I had on watch is definitely NVIDIA. So you notice, like with the energy names, with a lot of these other ones, they rebounded after the DeepSeek news, and NVIDIA has stayed extremely heavy. And I think it's that confluence of factors where it's, okay, maybe some AI efficiencies are going to weigh on supply or on some of the demand for NVIDIA stuff. But I think most of it is that conversation opened up the door to more tariffs on Chinese chips, more restrictions and things like that. So NVIDIA is definitely staying heavy. It's kind of caught in this channel. And I think that if we do, break these lows, that we could definitely test, the 110 and maybe even 100. But so much of this is headline driven. So NVIDIA will be on watch for me as well. And then a couple of the tariff names. So like we were talking about before, kind of starting big and then, zoning in. I think with the 25% tariffs that are going to be, implemented on Mexico, on Canada, and then China staying at 10% for right now. Part of it is identifying which stocks, which industries get hurt from that. And so something like CAT, they have a lot of ties with, Mexico. And so I think that if their manufacturing or if their imports or other things are going to be 25% more expensive, then that could compress margins, that could affect earnings and other things. And I think you're starting to see that a little bit in the stock. And you can definitely see names that had a sharp reaction on Friday when the tariff news was announced. And you could see which names were impacted by that. And then another name that I really had on watch was STZ. And this is kind of a funny one. So maybe a month ago, I talked about how, after the earnings of like a lot of the alcohol companies came out, they were showing consumer demand changes, like trends, how people are, drinking a little bit less or pivoting into other industries. And so that kind of weighed on them. And that was this big gap down here. So that was like the earnings, kind of blow to them. And then you have the tariff news where you have, 25% tariffs on a lot of things coming from Mexico. And guess what? STZ, they own Corona, they own Modelo, and all like 80% of their revenue comes from beers that are from Mexico. And so I think that you could have a big break of this channel down here. as that gets kind of filtered through the market. And then you'll see you could have short sellers or, like a short research reports come out, like short reports on things like this once the news gets a little bit more widely recognized. But again, you start kind of broad. This is my process. You start kind of broad, and then you look for things that basically have a confluence of things working for them or against them. And then that's what I kind of help to formulate some more detailed trading plans, where if I think that I have a bias that this could go lower, then I'm looking for specific places on the chart that could, outline that trade for me. So I'm looking for a channel. I'm looking for a break of that channel to the lows. And then, maybe we'll test if we get under 175 or so over the next week or couple of weeks, we could test maybe 150s. And so I will be watching that for puts. But I think it's just a great example of a name where you take like a macro concept and you just, drill in to see how could this actually be implemented in a trade. And then the final one I have on watch for a potential liquidity trap is this TCTM. This was a big runner, I believe, on Friday, and had, I think, around 750 million shares traded on a very low float stock. And so when you have these massive moves, this is like the first part of a liquidity trap that we talk about all the time. A liquidity trap needs to start with a big, gap of some kind and a huge amount of volume. And that is like, the first part of that setup. And then I'm going to be watching on Monday and Tuesday to see if that volume dries up. And then, eventually at some point next week, I would expect there to be a big like failure to deliver or like buy-ins or something where you had, a lot of people are, short in this thing, and then the volume dries up, and then you have a huge cover that it has to come back in. So this is the early stages of a liquidity trap. So I would need to see the volume dry up and then, eventually have some kind of buy-in come back. So those are really the main stocks I had on watch for the upcoming week. So Stan, any thoughts on any of those or?
Yeah, no, I think we overlap on several of the names, and TCTM that actually almost made my watch list as well. And I mean, of course, I'm going to watch it, right? But similar thoughts. It's more so a lot of volume turned. More so for me, it will be I would need to see specific things happen, as you mentioned, before I get any sort of interested in there. Whether it be long or short side, right? And then another thing that I wanted to mention, and sort of, at least I've been keeping in the back of my mind, is just being aware of the existing market environment and being aware how, a PR, a headline from left field can very quickly turn your good trade into flat or negative trade. And keeping in mind that that's no reflection of who you are and your capability as a trader. What would be wrong is to fight that, right? To now be stubborn and get into a fight with that instead of seeing it for what it is. So either be prepared for it, a little, maybe less size, or account for the opportunity of that left field PR next time, and that's again more so a reminder for me. Next time I think this is a big picture and here we are going back to where it came from. It very well may, but this type of a market environment is very real.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that is kind of on Friday, where in SPY or SPX you had a very complacent market. It was a gap up, kind of just drifted higher throughout the day. It was hanging out, and I think everyone on the Friday was expecting the market to close at whatever it was, 6,100 or somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And earlier on in that day, you had a Reuters report saying that like the tariffs were going to get postponed, or they weren't going to be implemented. Even JP Morgan was saying they expected to be postponed. And then Trump did a press conference and was like, nope, they're on. And so you have a lot of situations like that where the market is a little bit too complacent for this environment. And you can see that in like the VIX or some other volatility expectation products where I just don't think that the market is quite caught up to honestly, what is happening, where it's on a Friday at 3:30 or at 1:30 or whatever it is, you can have something that moves the market 80 points or something like that. So just being on your toes, and then, like we discussed before, being a reactionary trader, if that is something that you have, refined and you're able to implement, it's a great environment for things like that, where it's breaking news And if you can kind of tie in, what are the implications or how much can this actually move the market, you can a lot of times have a relatively controllable risk or small risk and get a big payout. So like if someone, like on the option side, if someone was watching SPY or SPX and they see a headline like that, and the market's only moving, a couple points for a minute or two, but you think that it can have a big impact, puts went, 5x, 10x, a lot of those. And if you're wrong, it's like maybe you lose, 20%, 30% on them. And you obviously size much smaller with things like that, but you can have good setups, good risk to reward ratios, but it's definitely a new market environment and people have to be very prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, those were great watches that you had, Stan, and some great market thoughts. So any closing comments before we, wrap things up for the week?
No, I mean, I think just, again, we're mid-swing earnings season. So plenty of volatility, plenty of volume, plenty of liquidity. There's no need to be first. Just, either trade what you know best or ease off on some of the other stuff.
Yeah. And adjusting, if someone's been more swing trading or doing other things, you just have to see, is this the right environment to continue to do that? Or do I have to lean into another strategy that I have for the time being, or use a combo, like, maybe hedging more of like swings or things. But those were great thoughts. And then final mention is Sam did a fantastic interview with Lance over the past weekend. He flew to Miami and sat down with Lance in person. And so we have a new Trading Takes episode that everyone should definitely check out. And Lance just shares a bunch of great, advice and comments. And Sam did a fantastic job, moderating that conversation. So definitely check out the Lance episode on Trading Takes. But with all that being said, Stan, have a great week ahead, and I will see you in IU.
All right. Thank you, Chris. See you there.
See ya. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to trade live alongside me and other members of the Investors Underground community, then check out investorsunderground.com to see if becoming a member is the right decision for you. They have some of the best technology and a lot of great members there, all looking to help other people improve their trading. And also check out Investors Underground content on YouTube and Twitter. Thank you.